He knows this on the River Islands guest line. I don't think he's offended by it. He's our second favorite Buster. It's Buster Olney of ESPN. How are you?
I'm doing great. That's a great compliment. Earlier this offseason, I talked to Buster and mentioned that he's the only human Buster that I've ever met, adult that I've met in my life. Most of them are dogs and cats, and I'm just glad to, be somewhere maybe ahead of some of the dogs and cats named Buster.
Yeah, do you guys have like monthly meetings and talk about your experience as a Buster in life and stuff like that?
No, it was really funny that you asked because, for the first time I ever spoke to him, it was just when his career had started, and, he called me on the phone when I had reached out to his agent to talk to him, and he goes, "Hey, Buster, it's Buster." And neither one of us said anything, and that's how we greeted each other for years. And then, last fall was the first time we actually talked about it. And he told me, we talked about how many dogs and cats we both met named Buster. And he mentioned that there would be times when he'd be walking out for warm-ups in the bullpen, and a fan would yell out from the stands, "Hey, Buster, I named my dog after you. I named my cat after you." And he said, "I don't know if that's a compliment or not." I'm like, "It absolutely is a compliment."
It definitely is. But, Buster, I want to know how many compliments you're hearing around baseball about the hire itself. Like, how has the arrival of Buster changed the perception of the Giants around baseball, if at all?
Well, Farhan was very respected within the industry for his knowledge, for sure. I will tell you that the early days of Buster Posey, he's impressed a lot of people. Look, I think that, if I think of the best general managers in baseball, okay, there is a common trait that they share, and that is humility. Buster Posey's not coming into that job saying, "I know everything. I don't really need a lot of help. I can take care of things." He's going in understanding that he's got a big learning curve as a former player, and there's things that he's not aware of until you actually get in the front office and you start to deal with it. He reminds me a lot of Chris Antonetti of the Guardians, who might be the best, or Alex Anthopoulos of the Braves, or Brian Cashman. These are people who don't assume they know everything, and I think that's a great first step for Buster. When Derek Jeter took over the Marlins, one of the things Derek did is he didn't hire a lot of outside people. He just brought in people that he knew. It was almost like he didn't like pushback and a reminder of what he didn't know. I think Buster's going to be, an executive as a former player who's going to welcome feedback where people saying, "Hey, you might want to think about this. You might want to think about that," in a way that maybe Derek didn't.
And how big of a job is in front of him? And put aside the gap that is seemingly big between them and the Dodgers at the major league level, but how big of a job does Buster have to try to get this organization back on a good track?
It's a big job because of the gap, right? Because the Dodgers are so entrenched as the best team in baseball. I heard a story recently about a player. A friend of mine was going on a golf outing with a player, and when news broke about the Dodgers getting Sasaki, this player, who was not a member of the Giants, looked at him and said, "What's the point?" Like, even players are feeling like, man, the Dodgers are loaded. And the Giants in recent years have obviously not had success in drawing big-name players to their team. But I think they're going to be better than what people expect this year, because I think Willie Adames is an impact-type guy. He's a great clubhouse leader. He's someone every day comes through the door, excited to play baseball, a teammate who's very positive. And their pitching could be pretty good. I'm really curious to see what Justin Verlander brings this year.
Buster on the ESPN with us here, Willard and Dibbs. Yeah, Buster, that Willie Adames comment you just made, and we got to meet him for the first time on Friday. He came on the show, and my goodness, is he impressive. Yeah. So I like what maybe a little more about what is that rep around baseball and how you see it applying to the Giants situation currently.
Well, the reputation is excellent. When the Juan Soto stuff was just starting up in the wintertime, he was just starting to talk with people. What you heard from a lot of clubs was, Juan Soto would be someone who's going to upgrade your lineup and make your offense better. Willie Adames is going to make your clubhouse better. and he's going to make your team better. He was so valued in Milwaukee because of the way he could connect with players in all corners of the clubhouses. And I mentioned, he's a really positive personality, which, in some sports, look, every Sunday NFL players get up for that day. Baseball players have to get up every day. They have to prepare to play 6-7 days a week. And so when you have a guy who is arguably one of your 2 or 3 best players coming through the door, and he's super positive and he's got something going with everybody and he's excited to play, that can make a difference. And it goes back, I think, to, when I did talk to Buster right after he got the job last November, and I asked him sort of what he was looking for, and he talked about wanting baseball players. Willie Adames is a baseball player. And I think that, getting him really moves them forward.
And we talked with him about the fact that he missed 1 game only last year, and he was lamenting the fact that the manager kind of made him. So you think about a left side of the infield with Chapman and Adames, and you got Jung-Hoo Lee in center. How important is it for any baseball team to have mainstays, which is something the Giants haven't had in a long time?
100%. Look, I think that, on paper, it sounds really like a good idea to have a lot of platoons working. And we saw, in 2021 when the Giants won, so many games, won the National League West, and it can work, but it's such a fragile equation. You have to have everything go right. And if you get a series of injuries, suddenly, that the advantages of having all those platoons evaporates. Now, every day, you're going to have one of the best shortstops taking the field. Every day you're going to have one of the best third basemen taking the field. You hope that Lee comes back from the injury last year and he can be a productive player on a daily basis. That is the hallmark. When Buster talks about wanting baseball players, that's a hallmark of that. It's part of the reason why I think in recent years the Braves have been so good, because they've got this lineup of guys who post up on most days. The same thing with the Philadelphia Phillies, the Dodgers. It's a defining characteristic.
Buster, what version of Justin Verlander are the Giants getting at age 42?
I don't know. I wish I could give you a great answer for that. I know this: he burns to be great. This is not a case where you've got a guy barely hanging on who he's just looking to get 1 or 2 more milestones and then head off into the sunset, and he's satisfied being the number 5 starter. And I remember having a conversation with Justin last September when he was trying to come back from a neck problem. He knew that he was short on stuff. He was really, blunt in his own self-assessment about what he needed to do and where he needed to get to. And he doesn't have the finish line in sight in his mind. His baseball hero growing up was Nolan Ryan. And I asked him when we had this conversation, back in 2011, why is Nolan Ryan your guy? He goes, because he was a power pitcher into his mid-40s. And that's what Justin wants. He wants to pitch to 45, 46, and not only pitch to that point, but also to continue to be a high-end power pitcher. Now, he's made adjustments in recent years. He's kind of remade himself a couple of times, but I think he wants to certainly get back to being a frontline starting pitcher. And, if that happens, the Giants could have an excellent rotation.
38 wins away from 300. Two-part question, Buster, which my partner always cautions against because usually only one part gets answered.
First part never gets answered.
Well, first part, does Verlander get to 300? And the second part is, if he doesn't, will anyone ever again?
So, one, I think he'll get there. I think I'm the only person in baseball who believes he will. I've been banging this drum for 3 or 4 years because I've asked Justin about that. What about 300? You go, oh, yeah. Yeah, it absolutely is something that he's talked about in the past of wanting to get, and he would be the last if he does. Because of the way starting pitchers are used, their innings are limited. They don't get as many decisions. Starting pitchers routinely come out in the 5th inning with 1 or 2 outs because no one cares about wins anymore. Well, Justin, he's one of the old school guys, and he does care about it. I hope he gets to 300. And as they say, if he does, I don't think anyone's going to get close to that number.
Buster Olney, ESPN with us. Buster, I know what the Giants are saying, but I'd love to know what you're hearing in baseball circles about how they're going to play this season with their top prospect, Bryce Eldridge.
So I haven't specifically talked to people in the Giants organization at this point about what they're going to do with him. You know, given the fact that he's so young, 21 years old, it makes sense for them to bring him into camp, let him get comfortable, see what he can do, and have an open mind. But my guess is, especially when you're talking about a power hitter, who hasn't so far had a year in the minor leagues where he's got like a 480 on base and a 600 slug. He hasn't absolutely dominated at any level. Is that they will, continue to focus on development for him. But man, is he an exciting player? Seeing that last home run he hit in the exhibition game, he really does look like Aaron Judge. Where he is physically and what he could do to a baseball and what a difference-making presence for the Giants right in the middle of their lineup when he gets to the big leagues. We'll see if early in the year, he can force their hand and basically drive his way to the big leagues by dominating in the minor leagues. That's my guess as to how they'll handle it.
Did you just compare Bryce Eldridge to Aaron Judge, Buster?
I compared him physically. I'm not saying he's going to have 360 homers in 6 years, but the way is watching him run around the bases after hitting that home run, I'm like, man, he really does sort of remind you of that just overwhelming power.
Can we get 359 home runs out of Bryce, Buster?
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's hard to not make comparisons when you have stature, and he actually won't be 21 until October. So I wonder how much that actually plays into the patience. And are you seeing more and more, Buster, that teams are more willing to accelerate guys' potential and their development more now than back in the old days?
No question. They have an open mind about promoting guys. I mean, look at what Paul Skeens did last year, where he gets the cup of coffee in the minor leagues, goes up to the big leagues, and he's one of the 2 or 3 best starting pitchers in baseball. I think that teams feel like the players are better prepared to be in the big leagues. They've been working with coaches. They've been getting better instruction at a younger age than they did in the past. And, let's face it, I think that just the exposure to the major league product is so different from when I first covered, where it felt like the players had to learn so much about, being away from home and being professionals and before, they got to the big leagues, which is part of the reason why I think teams left players in the minor leagues for a while.
All right, Buster, do you think this is a wild card team?
I don't think I'm going to pick them at this point to make the wild card, to be a wild card team, but we haven't formally turned that in. I got to see more of spring training, and I'm going to Florida next week and spending some time with some teams and talking to people, and maybe I'll get back to you and see. But I think they're right in that 6 to 9 mix when we talk about who are going to be the wild card team.
Well, I mean, it's crazy with the Dodgers that we sit here in February and we're already begging for a wild card. It's like you just assume what the Dodgers are doing. By the way, Buster, would love to hear your take on the Dodgers offseason and sort of how you answer it when people say, boy, this is bad for baseball.
So I remember it was Billy Beane who said to me, this is when the Yankees were in their heyday. And, he mentioned to me that when people would complain to him about the Yankees and how they had so many stars compared to teams like the A's, Billy would say, look, they're great for baseball. To have the evil empire, the team that would be the traveling circus that would fill every single ballpark. He said, that's really good for the sport. I will tell you that, I'm hearing more and more voices within the sport, like I heard from, about that player saying, what's the point? That's not a good place to be. You think about, they won the World Series last year, and then in the off season, they get Blake Snell, they get Roki Sasaki, they get Tanner Scott, who might be the best relief pitcher in baseball. They get Michael Conforto, basically as a platoon player, 3 or 4 of the guys, Kirby Yates, et cetera, it is going to be interesting to see how many games they win. And do I think that they're going to be held up? They already have been held up to some degree by people in the sport as a reason for salary cap, which I think the owners are going to push for in the next labor negotiations, and a change in baseball's financial system. I'd say this, for baseball to get to that point, you're going to have a major, major labor fight.
Union, which is one of the strongest unions not only in sports but in America, how much would they be willing to yield on any of this, knowing that it's going to cost their top-end players a ton of money?
So it's a fascinating question, and I think it's more relevant than ever, because in the past, when this topic came up, the union would dismiss the idea of a salary cap based on principle. We'll never go for that. That was always the response. I do wonder among the rank and file if there are more players who are asking the question, wait, would a salary cap mean more money for more players? Okay. The last round of negotiations, there wasn't really an effort by the Player Association to explore that. I think there'll be a lot of players who'll be asking questions about it this time around. I don't know if the union would adopt it. You're 100% right. If a salary cap came in, that might mean that, a Juan Soto type player would get not $765 million, but maybe $500 million. But other players would make more money. And I do think there's going to be a lot of support for that among the rank and file. We'll see if it manifests at the leadership level.
I don't know if Juan could survive on just $500 million, Buster. I mean, the poor guy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
and I say
exactly.
Too,
yeah.
Guys, it mirrors the PD conversation for me. When I remember for years and years and years, this Player Association was always, we'll never have drug testing. No way. Privacy rights. We'll never do it. And then guess what? Over time, more and more of the rank and file said, no, I want drug testing because I don't want to have to take this stuff. I want to be competitively protected. And eventually, the rank and file sentiment overrode the union leadership. I'm curious to see if that happens with the salary cap.
Yeah, the world does change. That is for sure. All right, Buster, I've left the most important one for the end.
Oh, gee.
And it's this, because you said that you've only met one other Buster human being in your life, and that's Buster Posey. Have you ever met Busta Rhymes?
So last year, I was at Citi Field, the Mets game, and Busta Rhymes was throwing out the first pitch. Now, when I covered the Yankees back in the day, they had a player named Homer Bush. Every time I'd walk in the clubhouse, he'd yell out loud, Busta Rhymes! And so I've always thought, I should get a picture with Busta Rhymes. We were in the same ballpark that day. I didn't go down there, and I'm an idiot. And I absolutely should have made that happen.
Oh my gosh,
that's not the payoff I was looking for.
No, I mean, seriously, I thought we were heading for a story where you went and got a picture, and then you guys went out that night. You partied until 3 a.m. Like that's where I thought this was going.
No, I'm an idiot. I have had so many regrets since that moment. I think I was talking to someone, and I saw him on the field, and the person I was talking, you ought to run down there. And I'm like, yeah. But what about the, tomorrow's starting pitcher, whatever nerd conversation I was having? And I should have cut it off and gone down there and gotten the picture.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe
next time.
Maybe he can do the forward in your Hall of Fame speech or something like that someday.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, well.
I appreciate that.
Hey, Buster or Busta, whichever way you like to go, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Okay, guys. Always fun.